My name is Isabella, and if you had asked me 10 years ago what my family thought of me, I would have said nothing. Not much, not they had their doubts, but literally nothing. Because to them, I was invisible. I was the girl who made strange decisions, the daughter who never followed the plan, the sister who didn't have what it takes. That was their version of me. And honestly, for a long time, I believed them. But here's the truth. While they laughed, while they dismissed me, while they invested every ounce of pride and money into my brother Daniel and my cousin Lily, I was quietly building something on my own, something they never saw coming, something they never thought I was capable of. A business, my business. And when it finally grew into something real, something successful, something powerful enough to catch their attention, they came knocking. Not with congratulations, not with apologies for years of dismissal, but with their hands out. Family deserves a share, they said. Don't forget who raised you. Your success is our success. As if my bloodline entitled them to the sweat, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the risk. And standing there, listening to them try to rewrite history, one thought burned through my mind louder than anything else. Where were you when I was building it? That question is where my story begins. To really understand why their sudden greed stung so deeply, you need to know how it all started. Because this wasn't just about money, it was about years of being the outsider in my own family. Growing up, favoritism wasn't subtle in our house. It was a floodlight, glaring in every corner of our lives. Daniel, my younger brother, was the genius. He got the best tutors, the latest gadgets, the unconditional support. Every math competition, every soccer game, every minor award, our parents treated it like the Olympics. And Lily, my cousin who practically lived with us, was the golden girl. Beautiful, charming, top of her class, destined to marry well. She was showered with expensive clothes, praised endlessly, paraded around at family events. Me? I was responsible Isabella, the one expected to quietly help out, to babysit, to take the leftovers of attention. If Daniel got a new laptop, I got his old one. If Lily got a designer dress, I got a pat on the back for being so practical. If I got good grades, the response was, well, of course, you always were the serious one. No celebration, no spotlight, just expectation. It would have been easier if I had fit into their mold, but I didn't. I wasn't interested in medicine or law like they pushed me to be. I wasn't interested in marrying rich like they whispered Lily would. What I wanted was freedom. What I wanted was to create something of my own, and the more I tried to explain that, the more they laughed. Business? You? My father once said, when I told him about a class project where I'd built a mock online store. Sweetheart, leave that kind of thing to people with resources. You're not a risk taker. You're better off sticking to something safe, my mother added. Don't make life harder than it already is. And Daniel? He didn't even bother sugarcoating it. You'll quit halfway, he said smugly. You don't have the guts. That was the script. And for years, I played along. I went to college for something safe, accounting, because it pleased them. I worked boring office jobs that drained me, just so they could say, see, Isabella has stability. But inside, a quiet fire was burning, because I couldn't let go of the idea that maybe, just maybe, they were wrong. Maybe I did have the guts. Maybe I was a risk taker. And maybe, just maybe, I could build something worth more than all their smug little predictions combined. The idea started small. A notebook filled with sketches, notes, half-formed plans. A side hustle selling handmade crafts online. Nothing fancy, nothing earth-shattering, just mine. And slowly, painfully, quietly, it grew. While Daniel was being praised for landing internships through Dad's connections, I was teaching myself web design at night. While Lily was posting pictures in her new outfits, I was packaging orders at my kitchen table until 2 a.m. While my parents were bragging about Daniel's future as a real success, I was hiding receipts and saving every extra dollar to reinvest in my tiny little business. Did they notice? Of course not. When I told them, they brushed it off. It's a hobby, Isabella. Don't get carried away. You should focus on finding a stable job, not wasting your time. No one in this family ever got rich selling trinkets. Every word was a dagger, but every dagger was fuel. Because while they doubted, I was building, brick by brick, failure by failure, late night after late night. And the more they ignored me, the more determined I became. But I'll admit, there were nights I almost quit. Nights when the orders didn't come in, when the bills stacked up, when exhaustion hit harder than hope. Nights when I looked at myself in the mirror and thought, maybe they're right. Maybe I don't have what it takes. But something inside me refused to die. Because if I quit, then they'd be right forever. And I couldn't let that happen, not after all the years of being invisible. So I pushed. I pushed until the hobby turned into a side income. I pushed until the side income turned into a full-time job. I pushed until the full-time job turned into a company. And all the while, my family barely noticed, until they did, until the day I made it undeniable. That moment, that unforgettable shift, was the beginning of everything that came after. And trust me, they weren't ready. Because the second they realized I had built something real, something powerful, something bigger than they ever imagined, they decided they wanted a piece. And that's where this story really begins. With the night my family sat across from me at the dinner table, looked at the business I had poured my soul into, and said with straight faces, "Isabella, family deserves a share." When I think back to the early days of my business, what comes to mind isn't success or pride. It's exhaustion. It's failure. It's sitting on my apartment floor surrounded by boxes, crying because an order had gone missing in the mail and the customer was demanding a refund I couldn't afford. It's staring at my bank account, wondering if I'd have enough money left over after bills to buy groceries for the week. Those were the days nobody saw. The days when my business wasn't shiny or impressive. It was me alone, trying to make something work while everyone else shook their heads. I had started small. At first, it was just a side hustle, making custom handmade planners and journals. I had always loved organizing, and I poured hours into creating unique designs. I sold them online through a tiny website I built myself, plus an Etsy shop. The first month, I sold 3 journals. 3. And one of those was to a college friend who bought it just to be supportive. But those 3 sales meant the world to me, because they weren't just journals. They were proof that someone, some stranger out there, wanted what I had created. It was validation. A flicker of light in the dark. Of course, my family didn't see it that way. When I told my mom, her response was, "That's nice, honey. But are you sure this isn't a waste of time? You should be looking for a real job." My dad chimed in, "A few sales online doesn't mean you have a business. Don't fool yourself and Daniel." He laughed. 3 journals? Wow, better watch out, Jeff Bezos, he smirked. Even Lily, sweet, perfect Lily, managed to make it sting. "That's cute," she said with a polite smile. "I'm sure it'll make a fun hobby." The word stuck with me. Hobby. That's what they all thought. That's what they all called it. And no matter how hard I worked, how much progress I made, the label clung to me like glue. Every time I reinvested my tiny profits into buying better materials, they called me reckless. Every time I skipped a night out with friends to work on new designs, they called me boring. Every time I stayed up until 3 a.m. answering customer emails, they called me obsessive. To them, it wasn't ambition, it was a distraction, but I couldn't let it go. I remember one night in particular. I was sitting at my tiny kitchen table, staring at a stack of unfinished orders. My hands ached from cutting, binding, packaging. My eyes burned from staring at my laptop screen all day at my regular accounting job and all night at my hobby. I wanted to quit. I wanted to shut the laptop, shove the journals into a closet, and admit they were right. But then I thought of Daniel smirking. I thought of Lily smiling politely. I thought of my parents sighing in disappointment, and the thought hit me like a punch. If I quit, I'll just prove them right, and I refused to give them that satisfaction. So I pushed harder. I started learning marketing on my own, watching free tutorials, reading blogs, studying how to run ads. I upgraded my website. I improved my packaging. I expanded into custom planners for students and professionals. And slowly, the sales started to grow. 1 order a week turned into 2. 2 turned into 5. 5 turned into 10. I still wasn't making much money, definitely not enough to quit my job, but it was progress. Progress they refused to acknowledge. Meanwhile, the favoritism at home never slowed down. Daniel had just graduated, and my parents threw him a massive party. He was going into finance, a real career, my dad said proudly. Guests flooded the house, gifts piled high, speeches were made. And me? I showed up after pulling an all-nighter working on a big batch of orders, only to sit in the corner while relatives asked the same tired question. So Isabella, are you still doing that little craft thing? Little craft thing. I smiled politely. I swallowed the sting. I told them, yes, still doing it, still trying. And every time I saw the pity in their eyes, the unspoken, when are you going to grow up and do something real? But here's the thing about being underestimated. It's painful, but it's also powerful. Because every jab, every dismissive comment, every roll of the eyes became fuel. It made me work harder. It made me smarter. It made me more determined than ever to succeed. I picked up freelance gigs on the side to fund my business. I did bookkeeping for small local shops, built basic websites, even babysat on weekends. Every dollar I earned outside my regular job went straight into my business account. While Daniel spent weekends at parties, I spent mine at craft fairs, lugging boxes of journals in and out of community centers, praying I'd make enough sales to cover the booth fee. While Lily posted Instagram pictures of her trips to Paris and Rome, funded by her parents, of course. I stayed home, perfecting new designs and dreaming of a day when I could afford a trip of my own. It was lonely. It was exhausting. It was thankless. But it was mine, and that made it worth it. By year 3, things had started to change. My Etsy shop had grown steadily, my website traffic was increasing, and I landed a wholesale deal with a small boutique. For the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, this wasn't just a hobby anymore. Maybe this was real. But when I told my family, their reactions were the same. "That's nice, honey," my mom said distractedly. "Don't let it take over your life," my dad warned. "Cool," Daniel muttered without looking up from his phone. And Lily, she just said, "That's cute. I'm glad you have something to keep you busy, cute." That word burned more than any outright insult ever could. Because what they didn't understand was that this wasn't about being kept busy. This was about survival. This was about proving to them and to myself that I was capable of more. And deep down, I think a part of me wanted revenge. Not the petty kind, not the kind where I'd rub success in their faces, but the quiet kind. The kind where, one day, they'd have no choice but to see me. And that day came sooner than I thought, because in year 4, something shifted. A TikTok I made showcasing my designs went viral. Orders exploded overnight. My website crashed from traffic. Suddenly, I was filling more orders in a week than I used to fill in a month. I worked around the clock, barely sleeping, barely eating, just trying to keep up. And for the first time in my life, I saw a number in my bank account I had never seen before. Profit. Real profit. Enough to cover my bills. Enough to quit my job. Enough to finally feel like I had built something real. When I told my parents, expecting even a flicker of pride, their response? Well, that's good, Isabella. But are you sure it's stable? You don't want to risk everything on a fad. That's what they called it. And I knew, in that moment, that no matter what I achieved, it would never be enough for them. But I also knew something else. I didn't need it to be. Because whether they saw it or not, I was building something unstoppable. When my business finally tipped into something real, I thought, naively, that everything would change. I thought my family would finally look at me differently, that the eye rolls and dismissals would stop, that maybe, just maybe, I'd finally get a seat at the table. But I should have known better. Because if there's one thing my family was consistent about, it was underestimating me. The first time I told them I'd quit my accounting job to run my business full-time, the reaction was exactly what you'd expect. My mom gasped, "Isabella, are you crazy? That's irresponsible." My dad frowned, shaking his head. "You can't throw away stability for a gamble." Daniel smirked. "So you're unemployed now?" "Congrats, I guess." And Lily, perfect Lily, patted my arm and said, "I'm sure it'll be fun while it lasts." Fun. While it lasts. I swallowed my frustration and didn't argue, because the truth was I didn't have time to argue. I was too busy working. And business was booming. That one viral video had snowballed into a full-blown brand. My planners were being shared by influencers, featured in lifestyle blogs, popping up on Pinterest boards. I hired part-time help just to keep up with the orders. I upgraded my equipment. I moved production out of my tiny kitchen and into a rented workspace. Every day was chaos, but it was the kind of chaos I loved. The kind where you wake up tired but excited. The kind where the stress feels worth it because you're building something that matters. And even though my family still didn't take me seriously, my customers did. Strangers on the internet valued me more than my own parents ever had. But with growth came new challenges. I remember the first big wholesale order I landed. 1,000 custom planners for a corporate client. It was huge. More money in one deal than I used to make in a whole year, and it nearly broke me. I spent weeks working nonstop, barely sleeping, fueled by caffeine and adrenaline. The night before the deadline, one of my machines broke down, and I sat on the floor of my workspace sobbing, sure I was about to lose everything. But I didn't. I found a way. I rented extra equipment, pulled an all-nighter, and delivered the order on time. When I saw the client's reaction, when they told me they wanted to work with me long-term, I felt something I had never felt before. Pride. Not the small, quiet pride of finishing a project. The big, overwhelming pride of knowing I had done something impossible. And for a moment, I thought, now they'll see. Now they'll understand. So I told my parents about the deal. I sat them down and explained what it meant. That my business was scaling, that I was working with real companies now, not just selling online. Their response? My dad frowned. "Sounds like a lot of work. Are you sure you can handle it?" My mom wrung her hands. "What if it gets too big? What if you can't keep up?" Daniel laughed. "One big order doesn't make you a CEO, Isabella." And Lily? She said, "That's nice. I mean, it's not like a real career, but I'm glad you're enjoying yourself." I wanted to scream, because no matter how much I grew, no matter how much proof I gave them, they refused to see it. It was like they had already written my story in their heads. Isabella, the quiet one. Isabella, the practical one. Isabella, the one who plays it safe while the others shine. And my success didn't fit that story. So they ignored it, but ignoring it didn't make it disappear. Because my business was growing faster than even I expected. Within a year, I moved from my rented workspace into an actual office. I hired a small team, designers, customer service reps, a marketing assistant. For the first time, I wasn't just self-employed. I was an employer. People depended on me. And as overwhelming as it was also exhilarating. Because this wasn't just my dream anymore. It was real. It was alive. And the numbers proved it. Revenue doubled, then tripled, then quadrupled. I went from barely scraping by to making more money in a month than I used to make in a year at my accounting job. And yet, when I mentioned it at family dinners, the reaction never changed. Daniel bragged about his promotion at the investment firm. My parents beamed, talking about his bright future. Lily announced she was engaged to some wealthy fiancé, and the room buzzed with excitement. When I tried to share my news, that I'd just hit a 6-figure milestone, that I'd hired employees, that I was negotiating a deal with a national retailer, the room went quiet. Then someone would change the subject. And just like that, I was invisible again. But here's the thing. Even if my family refused to see me, the world was starting to. My planners were being featured in magazines. Influencers tagged my brand in posts that went viral. My company's Instagram grew to tens of thousands of followers. I got invited to conferences, asked to speak on panels about entrepreneurship. Me, the girl who was told she wasn't a risk taker, the girl who was told she didn't have the guts, the girl whose hobby would never go anywhere. I was becoming the person they never believed I could be, and it terrified them. I didn't see it at first, but little signs started showing. My mom started making passive comments. "You work too much. You should slow down. You're missing out on family time." My dad started asking oddly specific questions about my revenue, my clients, my profit margins. Daniel, who had spent years mocking me, suddenly wanted to pick my brain about starting a side business. And Lily, she started dropping hints about wanting to collaborate with me. At first, I brushed it off. But then came the night everything changed. The night when the masks came off. The night my family stopped ignoring my business and started demanding a piece of it. The night of the family dinner started like any other, except it wasn't. I didn't know it yet, but that night would change everything between me and them. It was my mom's idea. She called me earlier in the week, her voice unusually warm. "Sweetheart, we're all going to have dinner together this Friday. It's been too long. Everyone will be there. Daniel, Lily, us. We want to catch up." Something in her tone made me hesitate. My mom rarely called me sweetheart. She wasn't affectionate like that, not with me at least. Still, I said yes. Because deep down, pathetically, I still hoped maybe things were changing. Maybe they'd finally acknowledge me. Maybe they'd finally see me. Friday came. I showed up at the restaurant wearing a simple black dress. Nothing too flashy, but not invisible either. I didn't want them to think I was showing off, but I also didn't want to shrink into the background. Not anymore. The table was already set when I arrived. My parents sat across from Daniel and his wife. Lily sat beside her fiancé, showing off a glittering ring, laughing at something Daniel said. For a moment, I stood there unnoticed. Then my mom looked up. "Isabella? There you are. We were just talking about you." Talking about me. The words landed like a spark in my chest. Maybe this time would be different. I took my seat, heart pounding with cautious hope. Dinner began normally enough, salads, small talk, clinking glasses. But then my dad cleared his throat, and everything shifted. "So, Isabella," he began, his tone strangely formal. "Your mother and I were talking about your business." I nodded slowly. "Yes?" Across the table, Daniel smirked. Lily leaned forward, eyes gleaming. My dad continued, "It seems like you've done well for yourself." "More than well, actually. We're proud of you, proud." The word felt foreign coming from him. But before I could respond, my mom chimed in. "And since family is family, we thought it might be time to share the wealth." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "Excuse me?" Daniel chuckled. "Come on, Isabella. Don't play dumb. You wouldn't even be where you are if it weren't for us. Family support, connections, values, we shaped you. It's only fair that we all benefit." Lily smiled sweetly, her tone dripping with faux innocence. "Exactly. We're not asking for much, just a percentage. Think of it as keeping the success in the family." I stared at them, my stomach turning. They weren't proud. They weren't supportive. They wanted a piece of me. I set my fork down. "You're asking me to give you money." "Not money," my mom corrected quickly. "A share, a stake, something formal so that as you grow, we all grow." My dad nodded. "You can set aside, say, 20%, split among us. It's the right thing to do." I laughed. I couldn't help it. 20%? You want me to just hand over 20% of the company I built from scratch? The company you all said would never work? Daniel's smirk faltered. "Don't be dramatic. It's family. We deserve it. Deserve." That word lit a fire in me. Because where was their support when I was staying up all night, hand-cutting planners on the living room floor? Where were they when I was crying over a broken machine, convinced I'd lose my first big client? Where were they when I was eating ramen because I couldn't afford groceries? Nowhere. They weren't there. But now that I was successful, suddenly they deserved it. I looked at each of them, one by one. My mom, avoiding my eyes, twisting her napkin nervously. My dad, stone-faced, convinced of his authority. Daniel, smug, already picturing the money. Lily, smiling like she'd already won. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small at that table. I felt powerful. "No," I said simply. The word was sharp, clean, final. The table went silent. Daniel blinked. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no. You didn't build this business. You didn't believe in it. You laughed at me. You dismissed me. And now you want to claim credit? Absolutely not." My dad's jaw tightened. "Isabella, don't be unreasonable. Family looks out for each other." "Really?" I snapped. "Because where was that when I needed you? When I was begging for encouragement? When I was working myself to exhaustion? Family only looks out for family when it benefits you, not me." Lily's smile faded. "Isabella, don't be selfish. This could be good for all of us. We could be stronger together." I turned to her, my voice low and steady. "No, Lily. You want my work without the sacrifice. You want the reward without the risk. That's not family, that's entitlement." For a moment, no one spoke. The tension was thick, heavy. Then Daniel scoffed, pushing his chair back. "Unbelievable. You think you're better than us now? Fine, don't come crying to us when it all falls apart." My mom reached out, her hand trembling. "Isabella, please, think about this. We just want to be included." I stood up, my hands shaking, but not from fear, from clarity. "You had your chance to be included," I said quietly, "from the very beginning. And you chose to exclude me. You made me feel small, unwanted, invisible, but I'm not invisible anymore. I walked out of that restaurant without looking back, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the forgotten child. I felt like the woman who had built something unstoppable, on her own, without them. I didn't go home that night feeling sad. For the first time, I didn't cry after a family gathering. I didn't sit in my car, gripping the steering wheel, replaying every word they said until my chest hurt. Number. That night, I drove home with my windows down, the cool air rushing against my face, and a strange sense of freedom blooming in my chest. It was over. Not my family, though maybe, in a way, it was. But the version of me that kept shrinking to fit their expectations, that Isabella was gone. The next morning, I woke up early. I brewed coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. The weight of what happened pressed at the back of my mind, but instead of letting it drag me down, I channeled it into focus. Emails, orders, plans, new product designs. I poured myself into my business. Every keystroke was a reminder. I built this, alone, and I don't owe anyone a piece of it. The weeks that followed were surprisingly quiet. My parents didn't call, Daniel didn't text, Lily didn't accidentally tag me in smug Instagram stories. At first, the silence stung. It was proof of what I'd always suspected. They didn't want me, not really. They only wanted what I could give them. But then something incredible happened. I realized the silence was peaceful. No more constant judgment, no more comparisons, no more pretending, just me. And honestly, that felt like a blessing. Months passed. My business hit new milestones. Sales doubled, then tripled. I hired a small team, opened a second office, and even got featured in a local business magazine. For once, the recognition wasn't stolen by anyone else. It was mine, and I savored every bit of it. Then one day, the phone rang. It was my mom. I stared at her name flashing on the screen, my stomach tightening. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but something in me wanted closure. So I answered. "Isabella," she began, her voice unusually soft. "We've been meaning to talk." "We miss you." I almost laughed. "You miss me? Or you miss the idea of me giving you what you want?" She sighed. "Sweetheart, it's not like that. Your father and we just want to be part of your life again." Part of me wanted to scream. Where were you when I needed you? Where was this wanting to be part of my life when I was struggling, when I was alone, when I was building something out of nothing? But another part of me, stronger now, knew I didn't need their validation anymore. So I stayed calm. "I appreciate that, Mom. But being part of my life doesn't mean taking from me. If you want to be here, it has to be on equal terms. Respect, support, no demands, no strings." There was a long silence. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know if your father will agree to that." "Then that's his choice," I replied firmly. "But my boundaries aren't changing." And with that, I ended the call. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty. I felt powerful. The truth is, my family may never change. They may never see me as anything other than the girl who was less than Daniel and Lily, but that doesn't matter anymore, because I know who I am. I am Isabella, the girl who stayed up late, broke down in tears, and kept going anyway. The woman who built something from the ground up when no one believed in her. The entrepreneur who owns every success, every triumph, every victory because I earned it. And I'll be damned if I let anyone take that away from me. Sometimes family isn't the people you're born to. It's the people who show up, the people who believe in you, the people who celebrate you without expecting a piece of the cake. And if that means my circle is smaller, quieter, maybe even lonelier at times, that's okay, because at least it's real. So when people ask me now how I feel about my family wanting a share of my success, I tell them the truth. They wanted the reward without the work, and I'm not here to hand out trophies to people who didn't run the race. My business is mine, my life is mine, and my future will be mine too. That's the story of how I built my business alone, and how I finally learned that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is say no.